So, welcome to the third episode. And remember, I am sharing my life story because there are so many relevant lessons for all of us within this incredible life. I've certainly packed it in, guys. I think it's beginning to gather that. And I've jumped on planes, I talked about that, and I've taken opportunities. And so far, I've been speaking about the biggest challenges, but actually, I haven't got to the magic, incredible when it all started to make sense yet. But of course, I'm doing these little short reels on Instagram, and there's so little that you can get in there. And hence why this is now my third episode. Every Friday they drop. So please subscribe and share it because we're just getting this going. It's going to come into some fantastic interviews as well with some of the most dynamite humans that I have met along the way that have been really impactful on my journey as well. So it hasn't all been like, people have done this and misaligned people have done that. Like I said, it's been a balance of all of it. But today I wanted to share with you just sort of the crazy part of my life. So picking up from the last episode. And so now I'm obviously on TV, going over every week. In fact, they started to come over to me, the film crew. This was Trisha originally. And they started to come over, bring couples over. Oh, wow. I was clearing traumas of the most horrendous things. I think the worst thing on the first episode that they came out to film in Spain in this beautiful retreat. Oh, it was a really, really tough one. This guy had been abused as a child. I mean, literally the worst of the worst, tied to a tree, and his dad, and horrible, horrible stuff. And obviously it plays out in his adult life. That's what happens if we don't clear this stuff. And I was able to go in, clear that trauma to the point where at the end of 3 days, he had an amazing relationship with his wife. So yeah, it started to gather more and more momentum, this TV show. And then I got invited to go on to Lorraine on ITV and later this morning. And then I'll tell you this one. So how it has always been a divinely guided journey, because I was going to say then I ended up on the Doctor Show, which is a Dr. Phil show out of America. And how does this divine guidance work? So basically, I've done this crazy article. There used to be some crazy articles out in those days, okay? So if you need telling this, don't believe everything that you read in the newspapers. I think there was times where I was celibate in life and papers are saying, my million lovers or whatever. Bringing up my kids and working hard. And don't get me wrong, I had boyfriends after Steve. And of course, I did some incredible learning journeys of relationships, some for 8-9 months, some for 3 years. Oh, been there, experienced it all and loved again as well. So that's all amazing. But a lot of the time I was connected to the divine, and I chose periods of my life. I've done this where I've chose to have times of celibacy, and it's been, very much a conscious choice, and then times out of that where it was wild. But certainly, let me just say, don't believe the headlines. Anyway, how did I get to, I worked with Simon Cowell's business partner at one point. There was all these incredible things started to unfold, as I knew they would, on the TV show. And basically, how I ended up on this American TV show, that was it, was, and the divinely guided, listening and tuning in. So I'm sitting in this hotel room. I've got to go on TV and debate with the agony aunt. Okay. And she was like the national treasure of daytime TV. She's about, late 70s, 80s. And she was called Denise, for those of you that will remember her. God rest her soul. And Denise, I had a debate with her because obviously she was a traditional agony aunt, and here was I talking about unconditional love. And just to set the record straight, this wasn't about just going out and doing everything you wanted, sleeping with loads of people. That's never been me. What it was about was, instead of the lying and the cheating that's gone on in relationships, it's actually really about being honest about what we want. And I love it that, Gen Z are moving more towards that. They're not just getting trapped into relationships, promising to be faithful for the rest of their life. We are not designed, by the way, to be with one partner all of our life. you know, we're evolving, we're changing. And part of our DNA states and is structured in a way that, you know, we're meant to explore and, you know, for the good of humanity, and have, you know, men are meant to have lots and lots of children with different women. That's what keeps the species alive. So I've always been a bit ahead of my time on this. And what I was saying is really it's about honesty and alignment. If you want 3 lovers, have 3 lovers. And obviously, I think at one point one of the headlines was 80 lovers, but hey, didn't that get a reaction? Anyway, so I get called on this TV show. And I know I'm meant to be there to spread this message about alignment. Of course, the mainstream media doesn't always tell it like that. Anyway, I'm in this hotel room the night before, and I tune in and I'm like, show me, guide me. What am I meant to say to have the best impact? I always knew it was about that, as crazy as the journey was. And I'm expecting this divine message, and I'm going to get... And I got call her an old battle axe. That literally was given to me. And I was like, well, that's not very spiritual, awakened, enlightened. Call her an old battle axe. And I'm like having this argument like with my higher self at the time. Call her it. I'm like, right, okay. There was no way out because I follow my guidance and no one will ever tell me otherwise. I'm thinking, oh, but to call the national treasure that. Anyway, I go on the TV show. In fact, before that, I'm sitting in the green room and she's sitting next to me getting her makeup on. Actually, the makeup room, not the green room, putting her makeup on. And I was like, oh, hi, Denise, thinking we're going to go on, have this debate. But in the meantime, we'll just have a little chat. Oh, no. She was horrible to me. She was like, not speaking to you, like I'm something on the bottom of a shoe. So I was like, okay, God rest your soul, my love. That's going to be easy then, isn't it? So I tapped her on the shoulder and I just went, see you in there, Denise. All's fair in love and TV. Anyway, forward rewind. I still don't know why I've got to call her this, but this is my mission, to get that sentence in. So I'm there, and the irony is this Philip Schofield, who, for those of you that know, will also know that I was a huge part of kind of exposing his corruption, but he was challenging me, you know, the Mr. 2.2 kids and married and living a normal life was challenging me. Hey, this is terrible what you're suggesting. I was like, is it really? And it unfolded later, didn't it, that he was married and having affairs with, well, if you can call it affairs actually, with young boys, which I ended up shining a spotlight on that, and we all know what happened to Philip Schofield. But anyway, he was there and he was challenging me, and then backing her up about how terrible it was that I was talking about this, and she knows better than anyone. So I said to her, I could feel it was coming and it had to come. Bearing in mind, you only get like, I don't know, 7 minutes on, mainstream TV at this point. And I said, well, it has been said, because it had to me the night before, it has been said, Denise, that you're a bit of a battle axe and you need to get with the modern times. Well, that was it, wasn't it? Soon as it finished, within an hour, it hit the Daily Mail online. Not really about me, my work or anything, just that sentence. Louise Vandervelde calls Denise our national treasure an old battle axe. So that gets picked up by America. 2 days later, I get a phone call and I'm on my way to Hollywood to go on this doctor's show. And by the time I get there, of course, I'm just like, yeah, doing it. But it was all because of the battle axe, not because of anything else. By the time I get there, the whole battle axe thing's been dropped and they actually did want to know about my work. So that opened a whole nother avenue. So this is where your guidance comes in. It might seem crazy, okay? But when you've got that connection, and obviously as we go on in these videos, I'm going to show you exactly how to get the connection that I have had all my life. And I'm very blessed to have had. That's just one example. So obviously my TV career starts taking off. There's these TV and magazines and all of this stuff. It was Trisha Goddard that called me the Pleasure Professor. So yeah, I become the Pleasure Professor and became the Pleasure Professor. But bearing in mind, when we go back to the Viagra story all those years before, which has got to be like 12 years earlier, it was all aligning for this anyway, wasn't it? I was meant to be the Pleasure Professor for that period in my life. Anyway, then what happened was my son, he wanted to be a DJ and he'd done his music, 2 years in music, and he's a musician, and I've always told my kids to follow their passion, and it was music for him. And he comes out of his music degree and he's like, oh yeah, I've tried to get a job at Sony and I've tried this and I've tried that. At this point I'd moved back temporarily so they could have their college and stuff in England. Not that many opportunities in Spain. Obviously the TV was mainly there and all that. At that point I had an office on Harley Street as well, so I was seeing a lot of clients, and I lived in Surrey. Anyway, and he's been into London, and anyway, I think I'm going to get a job in Costa Coffee, he said. And I was like, Jordan, got to follow your passion. So I said, look, why don't we go to Ibiza? I said, that's where it's at. That's where you get your DJing done. But you're young, follow your dreams. So anyway, I go to Ibiza with my son. And what I'm going to tell you now is what led on to me running sex parties in Ibiza. And may I just caveat that by everybody was beyond adulthood, and there wasn't like mad sex parties going on downstairs. There was an area upstairs where people could do what they want, and then like a dance, cool pool party downstairs. And I ended up running them. In fact, Channel 4 followed me for the making of this. This is how it came around. So I take my son over. He ends up getting to the last day. He gets himself a job and he gets himself a lovely villa. I'm there to make sure it's okay. And I go back to England. It's summertime, so my work's quiet. A lot of people are on holiday in July and August. That's normal. And I started to worry, and I'm like, I hope he's okay. And so Chloe was with my mum at the time, and I said, right, I'm just going to go over and see and make sure he's okay. Because then I started to think, oh, he's 18, I think, just 18. He's in this mad place. And then I started to think, actually, it's summer. What could I do? And at the time, there was something called Killing Kittens, which was Emma Sale. And she was running parties in London. And I'd never been to any of these parties. But I was like, actually, what a great place to run these parties. Never been to one, wasn't my thing. Anyway, long story short, I ended up running these parties in Ibiza, pure pleasure parties. In villas, and it was literally so that I could keep my eye on him. How mad is that? And so glad I did, because by the time I'd come backward and forward, he'd ended up doing his leg in. He had a pot up here, couldn't move, couldn't work, couldn't fly, stuck in Ibiza. But I happened to be there and in these parties in villas and that. So that was divine flow. I was meant to be there to look after him. Of course, then I got known as this woman who's running all these sex parties. Yeah, I did run it. I just ran it as a business. It wasn't my thing. And the more I saw of it, it definitely wasn't my thing. Some of these women, and it's never been my thing. And I just wanted to clear that up. I enjoyed the vibe and the dance and the music and all of that. And if people want to have a good time, sex is sex. So they did. It took me a while to live that one down there. I think people thought I was this rampant lunatic, especially as Channel 4 then followed me out, because then it all went out there, and of course the parties got busy. So I did that for a couple of seasons, all in the name of just being there supporting my son, which was needed. Another story like that, I was telling you about when basically we brought all these investors in, dedicated time for this technology group, all of that stuff. That culminated in lockdown. Still sort of lockdown went on for about 2 years, towards the end of lockdown. And we'd started to distribute these products. And we were signing, we had this Chinese investor that was like, loved them. They were these patches. And he was like, right, we will take this, and it's 50 million a month. It's going to build up to, and we'd already sold a few 100,000s worth. And we're like, this is just insane. These frequency technologies, really, I saw them help a lot of people, to be fair. Anyway, long and short of it is, we're looking for places to live because we didn't want to be locked down. So I ended up in St Lucia, had the team, took Chloe with me. My son by this point was travelling somewhere else, Mexico. Took my mum because I didn't want her to get jibber jabbed. And yeah, a real crew of us went over there. Listen to this, what you have to navigate as well. Anyway, our company at the time was called Earth Investments. It wasn't good for trading, because the minute you mention investments, you get into a bit of a situation where you're licensed for investment. So we ended up changing the name, but originally that was it. And it was an insane time. We were linking up different projects with different investors that were to do with impacting the earth. Anyway, out of St Lucia, this girl was there and she was like, oh, come in, my dad runs the government. I'll help you, I'll support you, I'll introduce you to everyone in St Lucia. So we're saying this luxury resort, which was beautiful, called the Landings on the seafront. We've got all of these massive deals happening. It's like happy days. I spend about, I don't know, probably 30,000 at the time on. I always reinvest back into my partnerships and companies because it's always about let's expand it together. And anyway, I ended up running this massive event, all the government come, and lots of people flying from the States. And I actually bring in some of my distributors. We've got a large distribution network, okay? So I bring in some of my distributors and they end up meeting the owner. And obviously he supplies to us. We had a white label, we supplied to them. Get everyone in a room, all happy days, expand, raise him his investment. What does he do? Goes in to our clients when we've got trade secrets, circumvents us massively, steals our clients. Oh, it was so bad. Offers it at a much cheaper price. You know, these are ones that we've worked 2 years for. There was so much misalignment showed up in that. Anyway, simultaneously, we got this weird girl who's got her dad in the government, who, unbeknown to us, has set up a company called New Earth Investments. And she thought that was great. So we paid all the event and everything. And what she's done is then tried to make out it's all running through her company. So there's all this misaligned stuff going on. I was like, oh my God, can people actually do this stuff? But they did. And as it started to unfold, I was like, I'm going to shine a light on this, because how has she welcomed us in, set up a company called New Earth Investments, then saying it all runs through me. She hadn't signed an agreement, which would have gone 50-50 with her for anything anyway. That's how we work. And then because I shone a light on it, and then obviously the owners of this company were like, we don't know this New Earth Investment. So he, at that point, had our back. And guess what happened? She's then goes all around the houses. We start getting messages that the government are basically going to frame us and we're going to get arrested in the Caribbean. Well, we haven't even done anything wrong. Like literally, we've just, I just paid it all forward, given it all out, invited everyone. Everyone's tried to like circumvent and be shady. Oh my God. The amount of times that things like this happen in business. Not all the time. There's amazing aligned people that are just have integrity, and they are there. They're few and far between, but they are there. It just meant that I had to spin the model and work in a different way, but that's fine. So yeah, what happens then is I get word from someone that, listen, they're going to frame you because we'd shone a spotlight on her corruption. She didn't like it. Her dad's really high in the government. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like, I'm getting out of here. So I grabbed my mother, family. There was another little group that were with us. They were like, oh, we're not going, we're staying. I was like, I'm leaving. So we go back to England while I think about what to do. As I was in the air, I don't know if you remember this, but it went on the red list, meaning that you'd have to go into a hotel for 2 weeks and be isolated. All that nonsense they did. But because we were in the air, it was okay. So we get back into England. 1 week later, bearing in mind I've been there months, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. 1 week later, my mum's hip, bless her, that she's had in 10 years, pops out. And she ends up needing a major operation that ended up leading on to 8 operations. Can you imagine if I'd been stuck in the Caribbean with that? Obviously, she was insured, but I don't think the operation would have gone well, especially as it went wrong 8 times in the UK through no fault of their own. It was just a complicated case. So the lesson there is the divine is working through everything. I had all that horrendous situation having to up and leave, but it was all part of the master plan because my mum was safe, my mum was grounded. So yeah, I stayed with her and ended up looking after her after these operations, itching to get away. And then after that, next came Mexico. And by this point, I was like so knowledgeable. And then, of course, I had that scenario where we could have taken them to court and all of these investors. And because it was chains of investors, so we've got our connectors, and then there's another connectors, and then there's others and others and others. You relied on people being honourable and acting with integrity. And as I say, down these chains, that doesn't always happen. So that's why I've tightened the model of what we do today and how we do it with a lot of experience. But everything's working for us anyway. I learned so much. When I walked away from that whole technology experience and said, I'm not taking them to court. And then that night, what was shown to me after all of this stuff, what was shown to me was the purpose that I'm working on now. And it included all of the running events. You know, it's insane, really. All of the coaching that I'd done. Definitely the holistic doctors that I'd run, with medical doctors and holistic brought together, serving 15,000 patients. Even the models and promotions agency. Everything, and definitely the 2 years of university education, basically, in frequency and metaphysics. It's beyond all that, though, because we'd have physicists on calls. Because when you're raising that amount of money, like for a company, 50 million, you have to, you know, do the little teasers, but then you've got to listen and you've got to be on calls, 5-6 investor calls a day, every single day, moving forward these investments and technologies. And even some of the physicists that the investors would bring on didn't know, because there's no peer-reviewed studies for some of this. It's new, although it's not new. It was based on a lot of Tesla's work. You know, we could have free power right now by tapping into the infinite source of information. I've seen it operational. We can have, you know, use frequency, the infinite source of information and coding, to have clean water. You know, we can have plants. We were getting 400% better yield on plants when we use frequency embedded in the structure of the water. So all of this stuff, and there's this fear at the moment of, oh, running out of power, this and that. If they wanted to just click a finger, by the way, we could have free power. Tesla sussed it then, didn't he? And he got shut down. So yeah, anyway, it's been a journey and an amazing learning journey. And of course, that led me on to other technologies and other interesting but exciting things that happened. Again, there was a master plan through all the madness, follow the guidance. And I'm going to share with you how to operate from that level of multidimensional knowing. So you know when to go, when to stay, when to jump on a plane. That has got me in palaces. It's got me in rooms that people can only dream to be in. So yeah, really looking forward to sharing more with you. I think that's it. I think I've caught up on the reels for the week. It's late now. I'm just about to go out for dinner. I've got some guests here in my house in Malta. And just to finish, yeah, I'm bringing more people over to Malta. It's very exciting for residency and, you know, citizenship in some special cases, if they tick the boxes, working with the government here. So this whole journey of looking for the best places to live has ended up here. So I hope some of you will come and visit us soon in Malta as well. So because it's late and I've got guests and didn't get a chance to do this earlier, I'm going to have to personally turn this off. See you later.